Welcome guys, welcome back to part 4 of the Warhound Titan project. Getting more and more used to these videos. Sorry for the bad quality of a few of the first snips. I try to condense also the length of the video. In this part we will tackle the little pistons for the feet, talk about the positioning and also about some advice for pinning the legs to the hip section and the upper body. I will take now approximately 5 minutes with you to guide you through the process of the feet and the lower part of the leg. If you have never worked with Titans or with even Knights, there might be a few frustrating moments I want to avoid for you, because I went through. So yeah, hopefully this will help you a little bit. Here you can see these that we have two types of pistons. We have a bigger one. They are flexible, 2 parts, and we have smaller ones. The smaller ones are for the 2 connections on the part towards the centerpiece. The big one is, you see the cavity in the middle of the foot, of the toe segment, for the middle part. The first one, these here, they do not have another part. They will just fit in and slide for approximately 1-2 millimeters into the section. The other ones, the big ones, are for the centerpiece, and you will have to cut them for the desired length, the piston part. This can be done with the nipper. It's simple. What I do, I take care there is an upside, there's a down and an upside with a little skull, so that you don't accidentally glue the skull side and face it downwards. Take care that the skull is up. These little mistakes are avoidable. So here, as you can see here, it's a little bit too long, so I will cut this part. Usually I don't measure and mark that. I just calculate, and I go for little cuts, and if it's still too long, I remove more. So take care, take your time, don't cut too much of the piece, otherwise you would have to replace that with another rod or metal rod or something else. Luckily in that kit there is a spare part included. I don't know if this was an accident, I don't think so, from the resin mold. So if you make a mistake, you have a replacement. I just slide them in. I use tweezers to adjust that a little bit, but in general that is nothing really difficult. I glue this with simple super glue. I don't use epoxy for anything which is not holding any weight, and I use a more liquid super glue, fluidable, I don't know, liquid, to flow into the recesses. So in the very end, if you look at these, they will somehow stabilize the feet a little bit. So the overall construction of the pinning rods, of the little resin parts and everything, it's well thought through. It's not only fluff wise kind of realistic, if we talk about realism in 40k, but it is it really makes sense, and I had a good feeling assembling these feet, as I think they did a pretty good job. As you can see here in this video, you might notice the little rods poking out from the joints. If they are too long, I will file them or saw this later. Here, if you have not put this in, you can use your tweezers or something else to push the rod into the recess, and that's the reason why I only glue both sides but not the piston itself in its holding, so I'm able to adjust a little bit and for a short moment the length of the piston if I made a mistake and cut them a little bit too short. yeah, but there is nothing really, this is not really a challenging task. Yeah, again, I gave this advice in the former videos. I would recommend when you assemble the whole thing, make little bags, little zip bags of the individual parts. There are, for such a big model, not so many parts in it, but especially all these little pistons and details and imperial aquilers and everything, you can easily lose something. So, and if you are not so well sorted, then I can just recommend using zip bags to store all your little bits and pieces. So I'm nearly done with this one. Now I'm going for the small ones. I will fast forward this in a minute. So you know, again, I want to show you details, but I don't want you to spend 10 minutes just watching me putting in little pistons. So I will fast forward in certain parts of this video and slow down when I think I have to tell you something. So yeah, that's pretty much the process for the feet. The one which is more on its toes, of course you have to cut more, and you will also, like I mentioned, reach a limit what you can bend and which angle you can create. So check this out before, but we'll talk about this, about the knee protection, in a minute. I use some scale 75 plastic putty to cover a few gaps here. I just used it because I had it. I'm not a particular fan of it for really gap filling. I think green stuff or something like that, you can press and net, and it keeps positioning is better. So I cannot really recommend that, but I'm always struggling with acrylic paste, so yeah, don't take what I did now as a good advice. It's very sloppy, so I had to file later. So the manual is quite consistent, and yeah, regarding the assembly of the foot, nothing really to take care of. So moving on towards the legs, which is the recommended part 2. And the legs have 2 joints. You have this connection between lower leg and foot. You have these ankle joints and ankle pistons. Now, this is the first joint here, and you have the other pistons, which is a solid piece. It's not something you can bend. It's a solid piece which predefines the angle. You can cut it theoretically, but it's not something I would recommend. It creates stability between the first and the second segment. I will use these 3mm rods to pin every joint again, like I did with the feet. So here I will go through, here I will go through, and also through the whole hip section, towards the joint section of the hip. So yeah, these can be easily drilled. There is enough space. Nothing really different to pinning like I did for the feet. You do not have to pin the length of the leg. That's not necessary. For the leg assembly, you have these parts here. You have the lower part. You have the connector. This is like the second joint segment, and you have the pistons I just mentioned, which have this fixed length. You can shorten them, but again, don't do it. It creates stability when you press this in, as you can see here. It predefines an angle, and honestly, I think that I wanted to make use of this the stability aspect. I will pin it into for the foot, the ball joint. and I will pin here the upper part, which has a flexible piston, and that's the part where you can adjust the angle and create interesting postures. This is the connector for the hip. This goes into the hip segment with this ball joint, as you can see here. This is really a huge, heavy piece of resin, and yeah, you have a lot of flexibility to adjust and to play with the posture. But it also comes with a challenge, because you have so many pieces to balance out, and it's very heavy, so you cannot use plastic putty and everything. So I decided again to pin everything and then adjust. And that's what I wanted to talk about. This is the armor piece for the lower part, for the colon of the chin bone. Check the angle. Really, do it, because it might happen that you have an angle which causes the leg to collide with the upper part, or even an angle where the lower part, the foot, is colliding with this armor piece. So if you keep this joint as it is, it won't happen, and that's fine. You have enough flexibility. You could theoretically go until 90 degrees. As I mentioned, I do not recommend that, but you have a lot of flexibility here to do that, but keep it. It's just an advice. It's a different story for the foot. If you do this and you create an angle where the weight is too much on the foot and you are leaning forward, or the Warhound is leaning forward, the lower part will collide and you cannot fit it anymore. So before you pin or glue the foot to the ball joint, check the angle that you have enough space to put this armor piece in. As you can see here, this is the maximum. It's already starting to collide. It is okay for the pistons, for the ankle pistons, but it's not. This is the maximum, of course, you can go for the armor piece. So take your time, check your angle, and then glue and pin. There are two types of joints for the ankle. The other one for the hips, but the little cavities will tell you which one goes where. For the hips are bigger. These ones are smaller, and as you can see, it's a little bit fumbly here, so I apologize. I wasn't able really to fix everything and to hold it in place. The length is quite extensive for the foot segment, so you have the ability, or the space, the length, to create some interesting postures. But yeah, as before, I'm repeating myself. Check the angle. Yeah, here you can see that is the pure angle. You can also check the you need approximately 3 millimeters for the piston in the tube, and here I'm just checking if my idea of positioning the leg will fit or will work. So yeah, I know, very long video to explain that, but it would be a shame if you run into an issue, glue something, and then you cannot really position the armor pieces directly. So yeah. Here on these parts, take care that you use this in the correct direction. These are the pistons I mentioned for the upper segment, which are flexible. If they are glued, they would theoretically hold some weight as well, as you can cut them in a way that they are stabilized, and you have like 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters approximately inside the tube of the piston to use. So yeah, just check this. I will use a 3 millimeter drill bit to drill through the whole joint. Yeah, just be careful, take your time. You can even do this by hand. Yeah, but while having all joints pinned, I can then more freely adjust and try out different postures and pose a little bit. So a few minutes later, I use my metal saw to start cutting the rod. I'm just marking it, doing it this way, but I use my rotary tool and an angle grinder bit to cut quickly through the metal rod. But of course you can just use a saw. With 3mm brass rods it's getting a little bit more difficult to use nippers, and you will not create an even, blunt, straight 90-degree angle cut, and this would look bad even if you or you make it shorter, make the drill bit a little bit shorter, and then cover the hole with some acrylic paste, green stuff, or whatever you want to use. Okay, you can see already the rod. I'll cut this in size. I will put this in. Yeah, realized, yeah, it's the other way around. And I will insert the rod here. In my former videos I told you to use a drill bit which is a little bit bigger in diameter than the rod you would insert. For the 3mm parts it's a preference. I want to have it exactly 3mm, so I have less space for glue, but as I can glue from both sides, the inside, and even smear a little bit will always fit of epoxy on the rod itself. It should give me enough stability, but also creates now enough friction that I can set up a nice posture. I think this will work, but if you go bigger or stay like 3mm, but it's a personal preference here. Yeah, so slotting this in. Okay, quite happy with the result. And now I can move this around carefully. Be a little bit careful nonetheless here with the upper part. These little ribs you can see on the joints here are easily breaking, and there is if you turn this joint too much, these ribs will break. Might look good for a weathered look, but if you don't want that, be careful. Do not turn the joint too much. Keep it in one positioning, or carefully remove the rod, adjust, insert back. So with these ball joints attached, I will pin the length, so ball joint to leg, and here I will pin the ball joint of the hip connector to the hip section. So I will not only use one here going through, I will do this, but just for the two parts, and I will use another bit. Now, this is the one I mentioned, go through, connection, and here under the central armor piece I will go a little bit lower and drill into the ball joint of the hip connector. 1, and 2 here in this direction. As the central piece is covered by a piece of armor, you won't see that. So it's would be my advice to create more stability, because if you would drill a straight line, it can still rotate at the hip, and you do not want to have your big fat torso piece rotating downwards because you have just used a straight pin. Here you have to be a little bit careful. If you drill this, just hold it and drill through this whole thing, because otherwise you won't find the right angle and it might not fit exactly with the hip connectors. So what I did, I just used a long enough drill bit, which is important. Check your drill bits first, otherwise with sheer size, these standard small 3mm drills won't fit. So I was lucky. This one is way too small. This is a small drill bit, and it won't reach really the length I wanted. So I was lucky to had a longer 3mm drill bit. I can, by the way, I can recommend wood drill bits, as they have this little spike in the middle, and they will keep their position. But it's not really required. And for the professionals, the drill bit I used was not a wood drill bit, it was just one I had. But if you have the chance to get a 3mm wood drill bit, I would just recommend that. Yeah, here I roughly estimated the length of the rods, because it will be inserted a little bit, so you have to I had to just check it from the other side that I had drilled deep enough to connect everything, and to have a blunt fit on the outside here on the other joint, which you can see here. So looking for the middle, and I'm going all the way through. You will feel when the drill, so keep it stable, will, here you see this in a bit, bop, there I went into the second part. So keep everything stable, steady hands, to create some nice holes, and yeah, you can then rotate also the hip part. Before you glue, and I will explain this later when I'm attaching these things, check the positioning of the little balls of these connectors from the hip pistons with the hip part, because if you turn them around, it will look unrealistic from the motion in certain postures. So they have to be on the same level. Now I drilled a hole into the ball joint and into the centerpiece of the foot. I will find a good posture and the right angle to do so. So here this is a little bit a wider angle. So I take care here to find the right angle for my posture, and as I wanted to have this foot lifted, I have nearly a little bit, I think like 80-degree angle between foot and shin bone. That's something you need to check. Here, that's what I mean, these little balls I meant, keep them on the same level as the dot connectors before you glue. This is a tricky part. Maybe you have a partner or friend who can hold this for you. I had to fumble with that alone. So really to hold the connectors to the central piece was challenging, and to find the good postures. So I had to a little bit rely on my memory to do that. And my recommendation is keep it 50-50 between both legs. So this will create much more stability, and it's very important to keep the hole tight and balanced. Yeah, you don't want your titan to tumble over only because you put 80% of the weight on one foot. Can work if this is close to the center line, to the center of gravity, but yeah, it's not making sense and would be really a shame. So move on to the next video. I hope you liked it. Please subscribe and watch the other videos. Thank you very much.